Okay, today is June the 27th, 2017. And don't forget that this Sunday is Communion Sunday. We'll have our fellowship dinner immediately afterwards, and this Friday is Fun Friday. So make your plans accordingly. Okay, let's prepare ourselves in our usual fashion. We'll have a few moments of silent prayer, the option of rebound if necessary. Let us pray. Heavenly Father, we thank you for another day. We thank you for the opportunity to be here, to go deeper into truth. Truth is in all areas, and we need to be open to it. We pray that you will help us to focus and concentrate, for we pray it in Christ's name. Amen. I'm going to start tonight, and I think this is a 5-minute video. Have y'all ever heard of the Prager University or Prager Institute? Yes. I found that you can go to Prager.com, I think is what it is. What does it say? Prageru.com. That's for Prager University, I believe. And you can get free videos on a whole host of information. Now, I came on this one. This is entitled How to Get Kids to Listen. That caught my attention. And we're going to try to play it. Let me put it on the board here. George, can you kill this light here? And Brett showed me where how to get it off up there and on here, and I know where it is over here. So if it works right, you ought to be able to hear it well. I learned a few things from this video, and I hope that you will too, and you can pass it along.
When was the last time you heard a child referred to as obedient? It's probably been a while. That's too bad, because the best research tells us that obedient children are happy children. And from my experience as a family psychologist, the parents of obedient children are happy parents. Since all parents want their children to be happy, the question becomes, how does one get a child to obey? Is there some trick to it? Well, there certainly are a lot of parents who think so. They believe that proper discipline is a matter of using the right methods, techniques, and strategies, what I call consequence delivery systems. Parents have been using these behavior modification-based methods since they became popular in the 1960s, seemingly to no avail. Would anyone argue that today's kids are more obedient than kids were several generations ago? I don't think so. The reason these methods and techniques don't work is that proper discipline is not a matter of proper methods. It's a matter of a proper attitude on the part of the parent. Let me illustrate the point. Let's say that for a week, I observed the classroom of a grade school teacher who has the reputation of being the best disciplinarian in her district. She consistently has fewer behavior problems than any of her colleagues. What is she doing? She's making her expectations perfectly clear, which means, first, she communicates in simple, declarative sentences. She doesn't use 50 words when she could use 10. The more words you use to communicate your expectations, the less confident you sound. Second, she prefaces her instructions to her students with authoritative phrases like, I want you to, and it's time for you to. She says, it's time for you to take out your math books and turn to page 25, as opposed to, let's take out our math books and turn to page 25, okay? Third, this teacher does not explain the motives behind her instructions to her students. Why? Because she knows that explanations invite arguments. Whenever parents tell me they're dealing with an argumentative child, I know that these well-intentioned people are explaining themselves. They tell their child why they want him to pick up his toys, for example, and he argues, because you can always pick apart an explanation. If you don't explain yourself when you give an instruction to a child, then the child, being a child, is almost surely going to ask for one. He's going to ask, why? Or why not? At which point, get ready for a big surprise. Your answer should be, because I said so. These very useful 4 words, and no, they will not cause psychological damage to your kids. Quite the contrary, are a simple but powerful affirmation of the legitimacy of your authority. Say it calmly. Don't scream it. Nothing good is ever accomplished by a person who screams. Last but certainly not least, when giving instructions to a child, do not, let me repeat, do not bend down to the child's level. Getting a child to do what he or she is told is a matter of looking and acting and talking like you have complete confidence in your authority. Bending down to a child's level does not look authoritative. It looks, in fact, like you're one movement away from being down on your knees in front of a king. I know you've read somewhere that you should get down to a child's level when you talk to him. Well, all I can tell you is that there's a lot of really bad parenting advice out there, and that's but one example. Speak to children from an upright position. That causes them to look up to you, and that is a good thing for them and for you both. I'm John Rosemond, author and family psychologist for Prager University.
To keep our videos free, click here.
You need to show that on Sunday, too.
Yeah. I didn't know there were videos still like that out there. Because I said so.
Isn't that what you got told?
Oh, of course.
That's what I got told.
But they didn't have to say it very often.
Right. It starts off.
Because I hardly ever ask why, because I already know what the answer was going to be. I would get that answer every time. So you can go to Prager, Prageru. Just Google that, and they have a host, many of these videos, and they're about 4, maybe 5 minutes at the most, and they're free. And what I do is save them, according to categories and so forth. What I was struck by the fact it said don't bend down to the child's level. I thought you got down on his level where he could understand you more, but it makes sense that he needs to see you as an adult, not like one of his little friends. And when you get down on his level, you look more like what? One of his little friends, instead of the authoritative figure that we all should be. So anyway, there's all different kind of categories of videos there. Okay, we're going to continue now with our discernment review. And if you'll remember, we are in the middle of, let me get over here where we are. How do we get rid of Obamacare? We nullify it. And this is from Publius Hulda. You're going to see something about that name in a little bit that you may not have known. And she's using this she's giving these resolutions. And these resolutions are a lot like revelations in that you are expressing something. And they used to do this all the time, especially when it had to do with government and laws. And it says resolved. And then they would give the points that they were wanting to make. So we're going to start tonight with point number 5. We're just going to dig in right where we left off. Let me make it big enough here for you to see it better. I don't know how this works, but I have it to where every time I hit the plus button to make it bigger, I don't lose anything. It automatically makes it the to fit the page there. Let's see. Y'all want it bigger than that?
If you can.
I can do it. How about that? Fabian, can y'all see it? Okay. All right. Now, before we get into this, I want to encourage you, because some of this is somewhat technical, and if you don't want to learn it, it's going to be boring to you. But it shouldn't be boring, because I don't know where there's very few places that you can go to get the teaching that I'm going to be giving you tonight and that I've been giving you in this discernment series under government. And it's important for you to know this, because if you don't know your rights, it's the same as not having them. And what Publius Hulda is doing here is taking a bill that was passed by Congress called the Affordable Care Act, also known as Obamacare, and she's explaining how everything was done wrong and what should have been done or what needs to be done in order to address this issue. And during it, you're going to learn some things that are going to be very beneficial to you. So I hope you don't think, oh, well, this is too hard, or I don't know how I'm going to ever use this. You can use it. And I would encourage you to take this little book that we had over 100 of them up here for everyone to get one, and keep it on your person, in your purse or somewhere, because you never know when you're going to need to look something up, because in it is essentially the Bible for America. I'm not talking about this Bible. The Bible, of course, is superior to this, but this is the Constitution, the Bill of Rights, and the Declaration of Independence are all in here, as well as other things. But this is what keeps us from becoming a banana republic. This is what we hold our government feet to the fire. This is how we maintain our freedom, by this booklet. And she's going to refer to this booklet and something else I'll show you about in just a few moments that is very necessary for you not to be conned and lied to and deceived. Because there's a lot of that. I was looking today on the internet. I went to Wikipedia. Don't believe everything you read on Wikipedia. I was looking up the 14th Amendment, and it was singing the praises of the 14th Amendment, and it was just false, false, false. So that's my little pep talk for you to stay concentrating. Try to inculcate this. You can do it. You can understand these things, and it will be meaningful to you, and it might mean the difference whether you stay free, this country stays free or not. So we'll just dig in on point number 5 here. These are the resolutions, and she says in point number 5 that all aspects of the medical care of the people not being anywhere delegated to the United States by the Constitution, or prohibited by the Constitution to the states, are reserved to the states respectively, or to the people. What is this talking about? What is she quoting? She's not quoting it, but she's using something in the Constitution to make a point. And where would you find that? What is she describing here? The 10th Amendment, right. That's how important it is. The 10th Amendment is hugely important. And so she's saying, since it's nowhere delegated to the United States, this medical care, the aspects of medical care, so it's reserved to the states respectively or to the people. Therefore, power over this matter is reserved solely and exclusively to the respective states and the people, each within its or their own territory. So some states may not address this to any large extent, and maybe others do. And where that is not the case, then the people have the authority to address the medical care however they want. But who does not have the authority to say squat about it is the federal government. Number 6, resolved that to take from the states all the powers of self-government and to transfer all powers to a general and consolidated national government in defiance of the Constitution, which was ordained and established by the people, is not for the peace, happiness, or prosperity of the people. There was never anything that was formally done or lawfully done that transferred the powers to a consolidated national government, because if it did, it would be in defiance and it would be contrary to the Constitution, which is the authority over our government. Therefore, this state, now I think she's making this appeal from Tennessee, I believe was the state she was doing it from. So that would be the state that she's talking about. Therefore, this state is determined to refuse to submit to undelegated powers exercised over them by the federal government, and rejects altogether the notion that the federal government may exercise unlimited powers over them. Wouldn't that be great if we heard states using that? Because they're refusing to submit to undelegated powers. If the federal government doesn't have a power specifically delegated to it, does it have that power? So if it doesn't have that power, why would the states submit to it? It's null and void. It's not a law. It's not a power that they have. That in cases of an abuse of delegated, meaning enumerated powers, the members of the federal government being chosen by the people, a change by the people would be the constitutional remedy. Now let me explain, because she's going to make another distinction right after this. He's saying in case the people in the federal government abuse their delegated powers, then what is the remedy? A change of the people would be the constitutional remedy. So if you have people in government that are abusing, they do have the power, they have the delegated power to do something, but if they are abusing that power, then the constitutional remedy would be to replace them. Get them out of there. Get somebody in there that's going to obey their oath to the Constitution. So, well, I know. So, she said we wouldn't have a Congress if that was the case. Well, that's fine. We have the right to fire the whole bunch of them and start over. And by the way, where do you find that? Declaration of Independence. Not only do we have the right, we have the duty to throw off any tyranny and replace it with a new government more of our liking. We have that authority as people. So if they are abusing their delegated powers, the constitutional remedy would be to change them, change the people in there, replace them. Now, see, the next one is a little different, but along the same lines. It says, but where powers are usurped, which they have not been delegated. The first one was if they have the delegated rights, but they're abusing it. This one, if they're trying to usurp powers which have not been delegated to the federal government, when the federal government acts outside of and in defiance of the federal Constitution by exercising powers not delegated to it by the Constitution, then a nullification of unlawful act is a rightful remedy. So if they're abusing a delegated power, then you replace the people who are abusing that. But if they are usurping power that was never delegated to them, then the proper remedy then is to nullify it. Another way of saying, what does it mean when you say nullify? You ignore it. It's null and void. Why would you pay any attention to it? Thus, every state has a natural right which predates and pre-exists the federal Constitution. Let's just stop there a moment. Do you understand what he's saying? This right to nullify something that the federal government has no authority to begin with is predates the Constitution. In fact, it predates this country, because what are we talking about? We're talking about the right of self-defense. How old is that right? It's as old as man, is it not? And where does it come from? It comes from God. By virtue of being born a human, you already automatically have that right. God has given you that right. So we're not talking about something Johnny-come-lately that some radicals have dreamed up. We're talking about a right that came from God before there was ever a government to begin with, or even a country. So let me read that again. Thus, every state has a natural right, which comes from God, which predates and pre-exists the federal Constitution, and that is to nullify of their own authority all such lawless assumptions of power within the boundaries of their state. That without this pre-existing natural and original right, they would be under the dominion, absolute and unlimited, of whoever in the federal government chooses to exercise tyrannical powers over them. And yet today you hear people gasp when someone says nullify, nullification. They think it's unlawful. They think it's heretical. They think it's a radical revolutionist, which it is none of those things. The states alone are the parties to the contract, or to the compact. Now, when it's talking about the compact, it's simply talking about the Constitution. It's a compact. It's an agreement between all the several various states, which, when they began, were the same as sovereign countries. And in a sense, they still are, because they are sovereign to the federal government. Now, can you explain to me, if I ask you, could you explain to me and defend why that statement that the states are sovereign and superior to the federal government? Yeah. The federal government is not part of the compact. The federal government didn't even exist until the compact, which is the Constitution, had been drafted and ratified by the people. So it doesn't have any say as to anything about the Constitution, because they're not a party to it. It's the people and the states that are the party to the Constitution, the compact. And that's what he's talking about here. So the states alone are the parties to the compact, and thus are solely authorized to judge in the last resort of the powers exercised under it. And what he's saying is it is the states, not the federal government, that determines the limit of their power. Congress, the executive branch, and the judicial branch are not parties to the contract, but are merely the creatures of the compact. That's Federalist paper number 33, the fifth paragraph. She says that as we go through. As mere creatures, they may exercise no powers other than those enumerated powers specifically delegated to them. Now, we've gone over this enough. It should be sinking in by now. You should be able to formulate in your own words and explain to someone why any state is superior to the federal government. And the easiest, of course, is to say the states created the federal government through the people who ratified it. Well, the people even had the representatives that drew up the compact, the Constitution. And through that Constitution, the ratification of it, a federal government came into existence. So why would the states or the people go to their creature and ask them to determine what the limit of their power is? If you go to a child, if you're a parent, you go to a child, you're the creator in a sense of that child. So why would you go to that child and say, we have a problem here. We're not sure where your rights start and where they end. So we're going to go ahead and let you decide that. Is that not insane? And that's exactly what's going on today, because people don't understand these principles. Number 7, resolved. The misconstructions long and unlawfully applied by the federal government to the so-called taxing, general welfare, interstate commerce, and necessary and proper clauses, to the effect that these clauses bestow unlimited powers on the federal government, goes to the destruction of all limits prescribed to their powers by the federal Constitution. That the true and genuine meaning of those clauses are as follows. So what we're looking at here is in the, let's see where, does he have a, does he have a spot here? These clauses are, let me see if they're in the beginning of this. I thought he had the number here. What?
It's right there. Article 1, Section
Okay, well,
8. I think.
yeah, that's it. Okay, and I have Section 8 here in Article 1. I wanted to read it to you because it doesn't give you. Okay. What we're talking about are these, have you heard about these clauses? Taxing, general welfare, interstate commerce, and necessary and proper. The people who want to make an end run around the Constitution, they take and blow these completely out of proportion. Because this is what I want to read in Article 1, Section 8. This is just one short paragraph before it starts detailing the about 17 things that are the delegated powers to the federal government. All right, this is in Article 1. Article 1 has to do with what? Congress. And in Section 8 of Article 1, it's going to give the things, the delegated enumerated powers whereby the federal government has authority to operate. And this is what it says at the beginning. The Congress shall have the power to lay and collect taxes, duties and imposts and excises, to pay the debts and provide for the common defense and general welfare of the United States, but all duties and imposts and excises shall be uniform throughout the United States. And now, then it starts going into, first thing, they have the authority to borrow money on the credit of the United States. So what that is an introductory statement. It is a generalization of all the specifics that are going to follow. Do you understand that? But because part of what it says here is to provide for the general welfare of the United States. Now, some people might say, oh, well, there's welfare right there, so the government's supposed to provide welfare for people who can't work. The general welfare is the general well-being of the country. And so I'm telling you, I wanted to read you that to start with because she's going to explain it as well. So you need to know when you say that, well, they can't do that. And they say, well, yeah, but they have, the Constitution says that they're supposed to provide for the common defense and promote the general welfare. Those are general clauses in an introductory statement. Now here's let's look at these one at a time. The taxing and general welfare clauses in Article 1, Section 8, Clause 1 that I just read to you employs general terms which are immediately followed by the enumeration of particular powers which explain and qualify by a recital of particulars the general terms. So you have the general terms, what it's going to be about, and then you have the specifics. It is error to focus on the general expressions and disregard the specifications which ascertain the limit of their import. Thus, to argue that the general expression provides an unlimited power is an absurdity. Now, did Publius Hold come up with that? No, this is in the Federalist Papers, number 41, the last 4 paragraphs. Now, I'm going to give you this a little more in a few moments. But what were the Federalist Papers? It was when the Constitution had been drafted and it was put out to all the states in order to be ratified. These were articles in papers called the Federalist Papers, whereby you had 3 people. You had John Jay, you had James Madison, and you had Alexander Hamilton. Those 3 were working together to explain to the people because they would have questions, and they're called the Federalist Papers. By the way, James Madison is known as who? The father of the Constitution. I would think that he knows a little bit about it. So when you are going to defend a point regarding the Constitution, you can go no higher than James Madison or Thomas Jefferson or John Jay, Alexander Hamilton. These people were the movers and shakers of this, and they had, I don't know, as close to 100 of these Federalist papers. So she's quoting from that. And by the way, do you know what their pen name was when they wrote these? Publius. Right. I thought you'd like that.
Cool.
You wonder where her name came from, Publius? Oops, excuse me, I just brushed my mic here. Okay. The federal Constitution declares that the powers of Congress shall extend to certain enumerated cases. This specification of particulars excludes all pretension to a general legislative authority because an affirmative grant of special powers would be absurd as well as useless if a general authority was intended, and this is in Federalist Papers number 83, 7th paragraph. By the way, I went and I was looking all these up. You can do the same if you have a computer. It's easy to do. So now the Interstate Commerce Clause. Commerce is the buying and selling of goods. Only that and nothing more. Webster's American Dictionary, 1828, says commerce is, quote, an interchange of mutual change of goods, wares, productions, or property of any kind between nations or individuals, by barter or by purchase and sale, trade, traffic. Inland commerce is the trade in exchange of commodities between citizens of the same nation or state. And they have put, you wouldn't believe all the things that they do under the Commerce Clause and say that it's constitutional.
I wanted to ask you, do you remember, or am I just imagining that they somehow tried to explain Obamacare's validity by saying it, they put it under the Commerce Clause, I guess because the insurance companies go back and forth across.
Well, they may have, because even if they did, she said she's thinking that she heard something about they used the Commerce Clause in order to pass the Affordable Care Act, Obamacare. But that's a non sequitur. Because why? Because there's no delegated power to the federal government that deals with any kind of insurance to begin with. So if you argue about whether it was the Commerce Clause or not, you would be right, but you're not using your strongest argument. It's not a delegated authority. They don't have the right to do it. Okay, Federalist Papers number 24, 4th paragraph. Federalist Papers number 42, 9th and 10th paragraphs. Federalist number 44 at the 2nd paragraph, or 2nd clause. And this is, all those are saying this. There's two main points that he's having to speak with, dealing with the Commerce Clause that people try to throw everything into. Number one, to prohibit states from imposing tolls and tariffs on articles of import and export goods and commodities, merchandise, as they are transported through the states for the purpose of buying and selling. So he's giving two reasons only for the Commerce Clause. And one reason is because when you have commodities, whatever it is, going from one state to the next, the Commerce Clause prevents them from taxing that or putting duties on them or anything. Wouldn't that be a mess? If every time you go from one state to another, the trucks would have to stop and they'd have to go through all that. The Commerce Clause kills that. That's the first purpose, and the only other purpose is number 2 here, that states to permit the federal government to impose duties on imports and exports both inland and abroad. Anything outside of that, it doesn't have anything to do with the Commerce Clause. It says Article 1, Section 8, Clause 1, Article 1, Section 9, Clauses 5 and 6, and Article 1, Section 10, Clauses 2 and 3 of the Federal Constitution give express effect to these two purposes of the Interstate Commerce Clause. And I looked up every one of them, and every one of them addresses this, and they all substantiate what she has here in bold, referring to the Commerce Clause. So if anybody says it's something else, that's 1, 2, 3, about 4 times in the Constitution that will substantiate what she's the point she's making. Now this is the last thing. Remember that in that little paragraph is talking about these different things. Necessary and proper clause. Oh, do they have a field day with this? well, we've got a bunch of immigrants over here. They came over here and they don't have any money and they need help and they need this and that. It's the necessary and proper for us to take from the taxpayers and give to them without their consent and just give them. And who is the one that decides how much they give? Some bureaucrat, some unelected person for the most part. And they would use the necessary and proper clause to do that. So here's number C, the last clause that she's addressing here. This clause merely delegates to Congress the power to pass laws necessary and proper to execute its declared powers. This is in Federalist number 29, fourth paragraph. A power to do something must be a power to pass all laws necessary and proper for the execution of power. Federalist paper number 33, third paragraph. The constitutional operation of the intended government would be precisely the same if this clause were entirely obliterated, as if it were repeated in every article. In other words, all you have to do is say it once. You really don't even have to say it once, in my opinion. Obviously, if a government has the authority, a delegated authority to do something, then they have the power to carry that out, but only on its delegated powers. You understand what he's saying? In other words, it's necessary and proper for the federal government to have the authority and the power to carry out the duties that have been delegated to it. That's all that means. It's limited, and that's it. It's limited to only that. She says, and thus the clause is perfectly harmless, a tautology or redundancy. Anybody know what a tautology is? It means redundancy. It means a repeated redundancy, if that's redundant in itself. I looked it up. I didn't know it, by the way, either. And that's number 33, third paragraph of the Federalist paper. Madison writes to the same effect in Federalist 44 at the first clause. Now, the clause merely permits the execution of powers already delegated and enumerated in the federal Constitution. No additional substantive powers are granted by this clause. So you see all these clauses are whacked away. If you just, and where is this her opinion? What did she give you? She gave you the Federalist Papers as authority, and that's as close to the original as you can get, and the Constitution itself. Number 8. Resolve that contrary to the misconstructions long and unlawfully applied by the federal government, the federal Constitution is one of enumerated powers only. How many times has she said that? That's because it is so important. Now, this is the quote that she has under this, and this is the quote from Federalist Paper number 45, ninth paragraph. The powers delegated by the proposed Constitution to the federal government are few and defined. Remember that. Those which are to remain in the state governments are numerous and indefinite. So the federal government is confined, right? You can't get out of this box. And everything else is reserved to the states, and their powers are not defined. They're indefinite. And yet people are thinking just the opposite these days. The former, that would be the ones of the federal government, will be exercised principally on external objects as war, peace, negotiations, and foreign commerce, with which last the power of taxation will, for the most part, be connected, so they can rightfully tax for these particular reasons. But only, by the way, when they tax a state, it has to be uniform for all the states. The powers reserved to the several states will extend to all the objects which in the ordinary course of affairs concern the lives, liberties, and properties of the people. The proposed government cannot see, why does it say proposed government? This is a Federalist paper. It hasn't been ratified yet. The proposed government cannot be deemed a national one, since its jurisdiction extends to certain enumerated objects only, and leaves to the several states a residuary and inviolable sovereignty over their objects. Now, this is the way they talk then, but what this is essentially saying is we don't really have a national government. Because the government doesn't have authority over all the states. And in fact, what we have is a confederacy of sovereign states with a federal government that they made a contract to only give certain powers to. That's what and that was in Federalist Papers 39, third paragraph from the end. The general, meaning the federal government, is not to be charged with the whole power of making and administering laws. Its jurisdiction is limited to certain enumerated powers. So if it's going to make any laws, it can only be laws that are pursuant to the enumerated powers that have been delegated to it. And yet, they're delegating how much water we can have in our toilet. They're delegating what we can eat, what we can't eat, and it's on and on and on.
What kind of light bulbs you can use?
Yeah, what kind of light bulbs you use. It merits particular attention. Let me raise this up a little bit. It merits particular attention that the laws of the Confederacy, those made by Congress. Now, when this is talking about the Confederacy, it's not talking about the South. It's talking about what? The Confederation of States. Today we have a confederation of 50 states that are sovereign, superior to the creature that they created with the Constitution. So it says it merits particular attention that the laws of the Confederacy, those made by Congress, as to the enumerated and legitimate objects of its jurisdiction, will become the supreme law of the land. Where is that found? Article 6, clause, the second paragraph. So the laws made by Congress as to the enumerated and legitimate objects of its jurisdiction, when the federal government, when the Congress makes laws that are pursuant to its jurisdiction, those laws will become the supreme law of the land. Thus, legislatures, courts, and magistrates of the respected members, that would be the states, will be incorporated into the operations of the national government. And she's got all this in capitals. As far as it is just and constitutional authority extends. So all this is saying, the time when the federal government has authority over the states is when they are passing laws that the states have delegated to the federal government, and that law is pursuant to that delegated power, and it's limited. In only those cases are the states to submit to that, because they are the ones that gave them that authority to do it to begin with. You have to give them the authority to do it. The states don't have anything to do with the immigration. That's and treaties and those type of things. We delegated that to the federal government.
Can say a governor of a state go to another country and have commerce?
He can have, the question was, can a governor of a particular state go to another country and have commerce? Yes, he can go and try to drum up business, but he can't go to another country and have a treaty with them. That's forbidden. That's not. That's prohibited in the Constitution. Can you imagine what it'd be like if we have 50 states and all these different states are trying to make treaties with all these other countries? No, that's an authority that was delegated to the federal government.
So we can't sell our goods, name a price for our goods, and make.
No, you can make. That's not a treaty. You can make contracts with other countries. You know, a private individual can go to China if he wants to and make a business deal with them and have it go. That's okay.
That's what Trump does all the time.
Yeah, but what they can't do is go over there and say, okay, if you're going to come into our state, we're going to tell you what a tariff is going to be, or we're going to make a treaty with you. No, those things are delegated to the federal government, and the states acquiesce to that because they gave the federal government that power. But the federal government has to act within the limitations that are pressed on it by the Constitution.
The federal government can tax our goods that are going out and coming
Yes,
in.
they can tax. Yes, they can tax them going out and coming in, but it has to be a uniform tax across the board. They can't pay favorites to any state and give them it has to be across the board. Now, why is that important? Why is it important the Constitution says the federal government has the authority that was delegated to it to put impost and ex post and all these different kind of taxes, but it has to be across the board. Because if they're doing it across the board and the people don't like it, what's going to happen? They're going to raise all kind of noise, and they're going to, the federal government's going to have to back down because it's to everybody, see.
Well, but sometimes it plays favorites if that's your thing and it's not another state's thing.
Yeah, in fact, what you're talking about is the main cause of the
Civil
War of Southern Independence.
Yeah.
Okay, this next one is in yellow here, so I tried to make this stand out. Very important here. The Federalist Papers, that's what she's been quoting from, and not the U.S. Supreme Court, is the highest authority and evidence of the general opinion of those who framed and those who accepted the Constitution of the United States on questions as to its genuine meaning. Doesn't that make sense? These are the people who wrote it. These people knew more about it than anything else, and they were there at that time, and they're explaining to the people how it is to operate. I would say that they have more weight than do the 9 people on the Supreme Court, and some of them are cuckoo clocks today. The Supreme Court is merely a creature of the Constitution and is completely subject to its terms. And when judges on that and lower federal courts who serve during good behavior, Article 3, do any of y'all have these with you? Yes. If you do, turn to Article 3. I want to show you something. What does Article 3 have to do with? The judicial. In Article 3, she's pointing out something that I haven't seen before, and it's really important. She says, that would be page 44, first paragraph. When you get to Article 3, the first thing you read, Section 1, the first thing it says, the judicial power of the United States shall be vested in one Supreme Court and in such inferior courts as the Congress may from time to time ordain and establish. The judges of both the Supreme and inferior courts shall hold their office during good behavior. Underline that. Do you see that? Good behavior. The B is capitalized. Good behavior, and shall at stated times receive for their service compensation and so forth. So what she's saying here, this is the first thing in that Article 3, she's saying that they can serve during good behavior. Usurp powers, as they did with their lawless opinion upon... I have to read the whole sentence for that to make sense. The Supreme Court is merely a creature of the Constitution and is completely subject to its terms, and when judges on that and lower courts who serve during good behavior only usurp powers as they did with the lawless opinion upholding Obamacare, they must be impeached and removed from office. Federalist number 81, 8th paragraph. Now I have my 2 cents in here. I think that's where I put my 2 cents. Let's see. Well, I don't think this is my 2 cents. Anyway, she says, it may in the last place be observed that the supposed danger of the judiciary encroachments on the legislative authority, which has been upon many occasions reiterated, is really a phantom. Now, this is from this Federalist paper number 81. I wrote that in because I wanted you to see this. You had this writer of the Federalist paper saying they were afraid, the people were afraid that the Supreme Court would get too big for its britches and it would just be the most powerful branch. And he's saying, if that was the case, if they were going to have judiciary encroachments on the legislative authority, he's saying it's nothing but a phantom, a ghost. He said it can't happen. Why? Because what she says here is that that they can be impeached and removed from office. The Congress has the authority and the duty to do that when there are Supreme Court justices who are not on good behavior. In other words, when they start doing the ridiculous things that they have done, then it's the requirement and the authority of the Congress to impeach those sorry judges. And then we'd have to go through another process. They'd have to be nominated by the president, and the Congress would have to okay it. The consideration of the important constitutional check with the power of instituting impeachments is one part of the legislative body, and determining upon them in the other is alone a complete security. Now let me explain what he's talking about. If they are going to impeach a Supreme Court authority, the House of Representatives would be the ones that would declare, and they would vote and say, we want them impeached, and then it would be the Senate's place to hold trial and see if they were going to convict them or not. That way you would have, it would be even more fair. They're always trying to split it up so you don't, let's say the House is full of a bunch of liberals, and the Senate is more wise, it wouldn't happen, see? Or vice versa. That's what he means by that. So that's the way impeachments go down. How many people have been impeached in the history of our country? Two. Who were they?
Johnson.
Yeah, Johnson. Not LBJ.
Yeah, no.
It was the guy that replaced Abraham Lincoln. Andrew Johnson. You know how close they came? One vote to impeach him. So, and by the way, does impeach mean they're thrown out?
No.
No, it means they're guilty, and then they'll go from there. In a way, it means they're thrown out, but it's not means that he's under criminal thing there. Okay, information for those who are interested in learning about our Constitution. I'm glad I got to this before we ran out of time. I'm giving you all this information about Constitution, and this very good and great information, but I want you to, I got this off the internet. Learn to defend the Constitution by studying the Federalist Papers. Written between October 1787 and August 1788, the Federalist Papers is a collection of newspaper essays written in defense of the Constitution, writing under the pen name Plubius. Alexander Hamilton, James Madison, and John Jay explain the merits of the proposed Constitution while confronting objections raised by its opponents. Thomas Jefferson described the work as, quote, the best commentary on the principles of government which has ever been written, end of quote. That was by Thomas Jefferson, commenting on the Federalist Papers. There is not a better way to increase your knowledge and principles underlying the Constitution than studying the Federalist Papers. That's why Hillsdale College is offering this online course, The Federalist Papers, for free. And I have a few other things that you can go as well. If you go to hillsdalecollege.edu, education, and then you go over to the courses, online courses, and these are some, the Federalist Papers is one that you go through, and there will be probably 15 to 25 minutes, something like that, videos. And as soon as you're through that one, you go to the next one, and you have a guy up there lecturing, he's explaining all these things to you, and they're phenomenal. I've gone through most of these. There are some other of the online videos is Introduction to the Constitution. Constitution 101, the meaning and history of the Constitution. Constitution 201, the progressive rejection of the founding and the rise of bureaucratic despotism. American heritage from colonial settlement to the current day. The presidency and the Constitution. The U.S. Supreme Court. Now, I don't know what you do at night. That's your business. But I think if you could fit in a few of these courses, it would move you miles ahead of the average person. Not that we're just trying to compete with other people, but it would help you be secure and confident when you stand up for what is right. And don't let anybody, I don't care if it's a lawyer or a politician or whoever they may be, just because they have credentials and they act like they know what they're talking about. If you understand these things that you can train yourself by going to these courses, then you're not going to be bullied. You're going to know your rights and you're going to stand by those rights. And isn't that what God expects us to do? God didn't give us these rights in order for us to be ignorant and afraid. He gave them to us for us to stand and be counted, to open our mouths, to stand for righteousness. That's what we are required to do. So where do you go? HillsdaleCollege.edu. Go to these courses, and all you have to do is click on it, and they give them their email, and they'll start sending them to you for free. Okay. We don't have much time left, but I'll get into this a little bit. Number 9. Y'all have any questions? Are y'all on board with this? You're understanding it? Okay. Yes.
This may not be proper time to do it, but I want to do it early.
Okay.
But back there when they talked about the government seeing after the general welfare of the people, but what that meant in the Constitution was that within their enumerated rights.
Right.
Not to just pick stuff out of it.
Right. It's an introductory sentence.
Yeah.
It's essentially saying, okay, this is Article 1, Section 8. So you look at the Constitution, it's in an outline form. Article 1 has to do with the Congress. So when by the time you get to Section 8, it's introducing something new. They do that on every one of them. You go to Section 9, and they're going to introduce something else that's new. And so they're introducing, essentially, the great portion of the enumerated powers. And they're saying that this has to do, we're giving the government these rights. It's for the general welfare and to promote commerce and for the national defense, this type of thing. It's an introductory sentence, and then you have the specifics and details after that. And anybody that has any sense knows that you can't go to a clause in an introductory comment that has the specifics following and say, oh, well, see, the government can do anything it wants to. All they have to do is say that they're promoting the general welfare. And yet they do it all the time, and yet it's absurd.
Mike, do you think they have a problem sometimes with the Constitution for the same reason they have a problem with the Bible, in that it's in older English, and they try to read it without, and then if it could go back to the Federalist papers, it explains it better than just reading some people.
Well, the question was, do you think it's because, actually, you're saying they were much more articulate than we are, had a much better vocabulary. They were more educated than we are.
But they also used quainter phraseology to us. It's
Yeah.
a little different to us.
Well, these Federalist papers are a little bit harder to read because we have condensed what was a beautiful language and the vocabulary that would go on, and they would explain it out to the nth degree. Well, we don't have time for all that. Just cut to the chase. That's what we want to know. So when you're reading these Federalist papers, you have to read a little bit longer than you normally would for them to get to the point. But it's there. It's clear. These were newspaper essays, and they were written not for the scholarly, not for the academics, not for the people that knew the law already. They were to the people, so the people could understand.
Right,
So
but
you can
my
understand
point
it.
is people today just reading even the Constitution. Their problem sometimes is, again, the phraseology and stuff, but if they went to the Federalist papers, put the two together is what I'm saying, they would have a better understanding. of
Well,
what
there
the
are a few
Constitution
phrases in there that are archaic that we don't use anymore. But if you have a little dictionary beside you, you just look it up and you're good to go. You just go on. If you want to understand it, it's very clear. And every time that I read something, whether it's a digital or whether it's in a book, when something strikes me, I highlight it in yellow. I underline it. In fact, I have a particular code for my own reading that when I go back and look at that, if it's got a star and a starburst with it, that's the max. I mean, that's something that I don't want to miss. I don't want to have to go back to a book and reread the whole thing just to find something. So when I read it, and you do the same thing with the papers here, the Federalist Papers, and once you get a definition of a word, you know it from then on. It's not hard.
I have a problem with it. I'm saying sometimes people, okay, why have the...
There is no, listen, I'm ending this discussion.
Okay.
There is no excuse for people to say it's too hard or make any excuses. It's too important.
Right, I agree with you. I'm saying, why do people misinterpret it so that...
They
should-
didn't. Those people did not. They understood what these papers said. That's why they ratified it. But over the years, they no longer teach anything in school that is pursuant to this. It's totally foreign to people. They don't want the people to understand what is here. However, the documents are still there. They're not taught in school, but they're online. They're in libraries. They're in books. You can go there and read them and educate yourself. In fact, that's about the only way that Americans today are going to be able to be educated, because they are propagandized every day through all these different means. They've been brainwashed. But you have to see, if you are a believer and you're positive towards doctrine, you want to learn the truth, that's the same motivation that you have with regards to these Federalist Papers and understanding about the founding documents that are so important. So what I'm saying is it's worth your time. And if you just get into it, go to this website and pick whatever course you want and get into it, and you're going to be, wow. When I went there the first time, I didn't know what it was going to be like. I didn't even have any paper. I don't know, I probably won't take any notes. Man, and the neat thing about it is, and when they're lecturing, when they're talking, you stop it, make a note, and then go on ahead. My only problem is I'm not all that organized. I've taken a lot of notes, and now I can't find them. But I'm getting better. I mean, just because you have a computer doesn't mean that you're organized. I had some great notes, and I about a week later, another one of the course deals came in, and I don't know, they're in my computer, but I don't have a clue where they are.
Handwrite your notes?
No, I type them. And say, I'm so smart, I type them and give them a heading, and then I don't remember the name of the heading. I can't find them. They're under a heading somewhere in my computer, but I don't have a clue what it is. But I'm getting better.
What do you mean they send them to you? Do they send them?
Your email. You give them your email address, and after you have a course, they'll send you. You'll have a little deal set for Hillsdale College. This is Constitution 101, and you click on that, and they'll come up, and it has a video there. You watch it. You close that. You might make notes or whatever, and make sure you know where you put them. And then about a week later, you'll get another one. Sometimes they'll have a little arrow and say, if you want the next one, you can get it right away. And they just give you one after another, and it's phenomenal.
Do you keep them there in your computer?
Yeah, you can. Yeah, I do. What I do is when I'm on the email, I have a heading that says Hillsdale Courses. And you just save that as in your emails, and every time I get one, I watch it, do all that, and then I just move it and put it up there, and I can see it anytime. I can send it to somebody and do anything I want to with it. Okay? All right. So, I'm over time, so let's close. Father, thank you for this time you've given us to go over these issues that are so important to us. There's a way that all of us have this mechanism within us to relegate things like this to the side, because after all, we made it this far without knowing any more than we know now, and it's just not, it's easy to watch TV, just sit there and vegetate, but these things are so important. We're talking about truth, and you are the author of truth. And if we're going to help our neighbors and help ourselves, we have to be educated, we have to be informed, we have to have knowledge, and it is there for us for the taking. Just like your word is there for the taking, not many people do it. So we pray that you will encourage all of us to at least get started and see how it feeds our soul. It gives us a sense of confidence in who we are, that we are sons and daughters of the Most High, and that we have freedom, and we just need to know it and how to maintain it. So we pray these things in Christ's name. Amen.
Michigan, you think of Detroit, and places like that, that Hillsdale is beautiful.
Oh, yeah.
It is
It looks like a beautiful college.
It is, it's old structure, you know, and it's beautiful.
We got a big statue of Margaret Thatcher.
Oh, yeah?
That-
You know that they will not take a dime from this company.
That's right, that's right.
That's why they can be completely free without worrying about any,
We took Savannah out there, we wanted her to go to school there. But that didn't work out, but it was a nice trip.
I'd love to see it. Yeah, I bet it's wonderful. And I bet, yeah, one thing you will not see at that hot campus, I can assure you, is all this not letting someone come and speak and riot because somebody has a different opinion. Listen, you're not going to have any liberals going to that college because if they went there to debate or even get question and answer, they'd be ripped apart.
They were.
So those young people know what they're talking about. All these courses are mandatory to go to that school. You have to go through them.
I'd like to go.
Again,
Live in the dark.